Rachna here, the CEO of the Graduate Student Association from the University of Melbourne. This is a special afternoon panel that we have put together, and I guess for GSA, it was very important, you know, just watching the news, hearing stories, our cohort ringing us with some of their concerns, that GSA puts out a wide statement and starts the dialogue of stamping out racism in our community. There is no place for racism, and we wanted to be very proactive in getting a whole lot of us talking about it, starting the conversation and continuing the conversation, because we can't allow that to happen. So I am so fortunate today that we have an amazing group of student voices and lots of messages from people who have joined our rally. And before I commence, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians on the land that we virtually meet. I am on the land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. And I pay my respects to the past, present, and emerging leaders, and my respect to the Aboriginal people and the Torres Strait Islanders. We've definitely felt that it's important to acknowledge that racism and mental health are, they go hand in hand to one extent, that comments that cause hurt and pain for others actually impacts people's mental health. So racism takes different forms and can happen in many places. And it includes things like being prejudiced, feeling discriminated, hatred by someone. It could be of color, ethnicity, and national origin. And I guess I personally, from a strong view, for me, color doesn't have a specific color. It is black, white, anything, whatever we call the color. And I think that's the point where you want to have an invisible color, where you don't define color. People often associate racism with acts of abuse or harassment, but I think it doesn't need to be violent. It doesn't need to be intimidating behavior. It can be just calling names and said, mate, I'm just saying this as a joke. It's that there is no joke there. So it can be revealed through people's actions and their attitudes. It can be reflected through systemic and institutional behavior. It's like, you know, I really don't like that name, Rachna, very much on that job application. It's too hard to kind of employ you. I'm not going to employ you. Is not good enough in our society. So today, it's not just racism is just not about words. It's not about beliefs and actions. It includes all kinds of barriers. And today I am absolutely privileged to have 16 members as attendees and panelists. And what better way than to start off hearing from our GSA President, Emily Roberts, about her views. And the format of today would be each of us have a statement to read, and I would like Emily to commence that statement. Emily, to you.
Thank you so much, Rachna. I want to start by acknowledging that in this discussion, my own privilege, and that part of my role as GSA President in these things is to amplify the voices of others. I tend to be a loud person, but sometimes the most powerful thing that loud people can do is to amplify the voices of others when they need to be heard. We're in an unprecedented time right now. The coronavirus has changed society in a dramatic way. And we've seen some horrible incidents of racism reported in the media, and many that have not made it to media, both overtly as well as ones that are hidden and subtle, that are permeating our society. But these things are not new. There are many people who face racism on a daily occurrence. It's been a colour of Australian history from the very foundation of European settlement in this country, with colonialism being embedded in racist thoughts and ideas. Recent incidents have highlighted that this has not gone away. As much as we have technologically developed as a society, racist ideas are still present and very much at the forefront of our current world. This isn't good enough. There are so many people who are hurt by racism and racist ideas that prevent us from having a society that is inclusive and welcoming to everyone. We say that we're a multicultural community, but often we don't appreciate all the wonderful things that multiculturalism can bring to a group. That it can be seen as something that people have to do, rather than something that every single one of us should want and desire to embrace. Thank you all so much for being here. It's a privilege to be president of such a wonderful organisation as GSA. The diverse communities that make up graduate life at the University of Melbourne bring in so much richness to my own experience and to the experience of everyone at this university. Hearing how those students have been victims of racism at this time and throughout their university experience is unacceptable. It's something that every single one of us should be working against. We're in a time of change. For many of us, it's scary. But fear should not make racism something that can be permitted. It's a responsibility, especially for those of us of Caucasian and European backgrounds, to be standing up more than ever against the racism in our community, in our society, and in our university. So as everyone feels safe and welcome here.
Thank you, Emily. I think they are just strong messages, beautifully worded, and I hope that people listening understand that with each one of us have a role to play, and along with that role, we have a responsibility to each other. And that responsibility is the spirit of equality. Mm-hmm. So without much ado, I'm going to get Archit Agarwal, the UMSU International President, who's been very kind enough with very short notice to come along and join us. So welcome, Archit.
Thank you, Rachna. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Hello, everyone, and thank you to all our friends at GSA for organizing this and bringing light to this very important issue. I'm presenting these views today, not just as the president of UMSU International, but also as an international student myself. When I came to Australia for the first time in 2018, I did not have a very good understanding of what racism was and what it felt like to be discriminated against on the basis of your race. It took me some time to understand how subtle racism is and how it impacted my day-to-day life. In speaking with other international students, I have since realized that a lot of us are in similar situations. We are discriminated against on a daily basis, on a regular basis, and we don't even realize it. When we begin to realize it, it hurts and has an impact on our confidence, productivity, and our personality. And although this constant discrimination causes pain, we are too scared to speak up against it. Because remember, we're international students. Many of us do not understand what level of rights we have in this country. So we form little groups, hang out with other international students, usually from our own home countries, because we're scared to face discrimination. Now let's take this situation and put it in the middle of a pandemic. It is human nature to sometimes only think about themselves when faced with adversity. We saw that when the country ran out of toilet paper and pasta. Things started to get really scary very quickly when people are threatened by something that they believe is bad for them. COVID-19 has definitely given extra courage to a lot of people to be openly racist. Uneducated and uninformed claims on social media, racial insensitivity in handling of this crisis, lack of support for our international students, and a deeply problematic and divided political rhetoric are few of the many factors that fuel this fire that burns the global spirit of togetherness. From the very beginning this year, we've heard reports of racist activities against international students throughout Australia. After the April 15 attacks on our 2 international students in the CBD area, we've heard reports from students who are scared to even go out to buy groceries. Melbourne definitely is no longer the most lively city on earth for its international students. I do not think that this is the worst, and I do not think that this is the worst it could get. I believe the international student community is in a long fight against this outright racism in light of COVID-19. If we continue to face global hardships for the rest of the year, international students will continue to face COVID-related racism. It is absolutely necessary that we have these conversations and speak with students, keep our communities engaged. We have to work together with our entire community to tackle this residual crisis that we are going to face. I urge all of us to stand together in this. We have to make it clear to everyone that out there that in this new global community, we cannot allow racism to simply exist. We have to stand with our most vulnerable and with more solidarity than ever. Human beings are capable of enormous compassion. Let's try and do a little better as a society. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Archit. And we express our total solidarity to our international student community. And I think as the CEO of GSA, on behalf of all our council and our students, there is no divide at all in our society. Human race has the right to equality. And I think we pledge our allegiance to our international students and the rest of the community to keep you safe and to continue to really face the epidemic of racism to be stamped out of this country. So thank you so much, Archit, for your contribution.
Thank you for having me.
Well, we have Theodora Wong, our council member, who has very kindly agreed to say a few words. So welcome, Theo.
Thank you for having me. So my experience studying in Australia so far has been pretty decent. I'm surrounded by a group of friendly peers and supportive academic staffs. Generally speaking, I appreciate the academic environment and respectful culture at the University of Melbourne. The diversity of students we have at this university allows the university to establish and nurture a respectful, open-minded, and embracing culture. However, when it comes to living in Australia, I have experienced racism outside of campus. In particular, during this global crisis, it is heartbreaking and devastating to read and hear news about racism targeting people of Chinese origin or other Asian origins. I've also experienced COVID-19 related racism on the streets of Melbourne. When you're wearing a mask and no one sits or stands around you on a tram during rush hours, it certainly does not make me feel welcomed in this country. And when I was being yelled, "You're back to China," when I'm not even from China, and coughed in front of my face, these are some of the worst feelings I've ever experienced, and it has affected my mental health adversely. I can't imagine how hurtful these hate crimes have impacted students from China and other Asian countries. The media is certainly the one to blame the most for the rocketed incidents of racism and racist ideas spread across the society. Their poor choice of words, speculations, and exaggerations of issues surrounding COVID-19 when the crisis first surfaced had really affected the experience of international students living in Melbourne. When Asians began to panic buy groceries and other amenities, the media immediately jumps out and say they're ruining Australia, they're nonsense, etc. However, when a white old lady grabbing 200 rolls of toilet paper, you don't see mainstream media expressing the same level of concerns towards people hoarding resources. The society still has a lot to learn and do to make Australia really as progressive and embracing as it proudly claims to be. At the end of the day, I don't think racism can be eliminated entirely. Unfortunately, there will always be people being ignorant and uneducated. However, the important message is that we need to be open and respectful to others, and it is crucial to acknowledge the inevitable difference between races and cultures. The world is much more exciting and beautiful because of the diversity of cultures. I think the society will move forward if we can each take a step to be mindful about the differences. Don't hesitate to help each other out when needed and condemn discriminative acts and thoughts. As the old Chinese wisdom said, we should be 和而不同, harmony in diversity. Thank you.
Thank you, Theo. Thank you so much. And I am sorry on behalf of our community for the pain and the stress that's caused on some unacceptable behavior of some of our community members. I think there is no place for such kind of behavior, and it does hurt me even to feel that that kind of behavior in a developed country, as we keep calling ourselves, that we continue to behave in this manner and have the privilege of calling people underdeveloped or the third world country. I think we make statements like that, and I often ask myself, in what position are we in this capacity to call ourselves, be able to kind of give rating to others when we demonstrate this kind of behavior. So I was looking at an article written by a very close friend of mine in The Age about racism on the 20th of April, and I felt it so important to say that the Victorian Equal Opportunity and Human Rights Commissioner, Kristen Hilton, said that for every case that they came across at the Commission, there were about 10 of them that remained silent. Exactly what Emily said, it's about people what we've heard, but we haven't talked about people whom we've not heard. And she adds that the racist behavior being reported was not against the state's shared values, and it's against the law. And reports of racism have been on the rise as the COVID-19 pandemic has progressed. And I'm aware that other state and federal human rights bodies have observed a similar increase in both reports and formal complaints. So the seriousness of racist incidents being reported is a real cause of concern. It's offensive comments and verbal abuse, and there is physical violence. And, there are very strong laws in our state, and no Victorian should be able to endure racism because of who they are or where they come from. So there is really no place for racism, and there are laws that protect us. And I think if we actually want to ensure that we are focusing on a united community, we should be not actually be fearing the law. We should be actually respecting humanity and treating each other with kindness and the respect that we need. So I'd love to invite Ivy Wang to read out her statement, please.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Rachna, for having me. I'm so privileged to be here. My name is Ivy, and I came from China, and I was raised up by a multicultural family, and I came from a multicultural background. When I first came to Australia, I learned that Australia is a multicultural country, and the community is so friendly. And I personally have never been involved in any racist event or racist cases. But recently, I also feared that if I wear a mask on the street, maybe I will attack that. Maybe I will be the next Asian students who were attacked 2 weeks ago. So at this time, like international students have been treated as cash cows by the government and also by the society. When international students are featured in news, no matter it's social media or the Australian newspapers, it only talk about how much the country will lose if Australia continues to close its border and continues to decrease the enrollment of international students. There are only numbers after numbers. International students should be treated as individual persons, not cash cow, not investment, or not even related to employment rate, just persons. And it should be treated as a similar people with all the people who have been living in Australia for long or short. So in February, Victorian government has issued the Standing with Victoria's Chinese Community initiative. I was really excited and happy, and the government is doing something to advocate for the Chinese community and also for Chinese international students here in Melbourne, in Victoria. So I wanted to quote Victoria's Premier Daniel Andrews saying, "We have a long history of standing by our Chinese communities, and that's what we need to be doing right now. We are with you during this challenging time. Today and every day, we are stronger together." So by quoting Premier Daniel Andrews, I also advocate that we should treat all international students equally with local students. And also maybe just to ask, are you okay if you see an international student on the street or in a supermarket? And also to make friends with an international student and to learn new culture. And also I want to see one more sentence. Hate speech is not free speech.
Thank you so much, Ivy. That's such a powerful statement that you said, that, you know, hate speech is definitely not free speech. And I think that's such a strong, such a strong statement, and really something we can carry along, that think about it each time we say something inappropriate. I think we will grow up to be a very strong community. So thank you so much for that wonderful statement and view, and the views that we can reflect and think through. I also think it's important to read one of our council member Fia's statement, which is, it says, she adds that she's sorry she couldn't be here, but this Friday marks the 75th year since the end of Second World War. And we should use this moment to reflect on the potential impact on the misinformation of the COVID-19 and the support racialized members of our community. We should not take for granted our freedom to be discriminated based on the color of our skin, visa status, and the language we speak at home. So very much aligned to the values of what Ivy has been speaking about. And I thought it would be good at this time to hear from, unfortunately, Devendra Singh, who is the International Officer at the Council of the Australian Postgraduate Association. Couldn't join us because he had prior commitments, but he was very, very kind enough to send us a statement. And I'm just reading his statement, which says, the situation of the COVID-19 and racism has affected the student community adversely. CAPA, which is the acronym for the Council of the Australian Postgraduate Association, has strongly advocated for the benefits to be extended to student community irrespective of their nationality, thus making sure that students are treated equally amid a crisis which doesn't discriminate people on the basis of their country of origin and birth. CAPA also condemns the recent racism attacks on the students in the wake of the coronavirus. This has created an environment of stress and anxiety among the students coming from a particular community. We would like to ensure that students, that they're not alone in such a situation. We're all with them and we'll be ready to support them in whatever ways possible. So we want to continue to express our thanks to CAPA, one of our very close partners, who continue to work very, very closely with GSA and the other peak bodies, and acknowledges the impact of racism and the adversity of COVID-19 on international students. So I want to acknowledge the work done by CAPA. I think it's important to understand that we do have very much a Racial Discrimination Act. So it makes it unlawful to discriminate against a person because of his or her race, color, descent, national origin, ethnic origin, or immigrant status. We actually have a law against it. And the RDA protects people from racial discrimination in many areas of public life, be it in employment, education, getting or using service, renting or buying a house or unit, and accessing public places. You know, it is unlawful to, under the RDA, it makes it unlawful to have racial hatred. So, you know, condemning certain communities, making comments which are hurtful, they are unlawful. And absolutely, it's important to understand that the Chintan has expressed this very similar views about that in his, that racism only thrives when the community fails to say no. And I think often we're asked, you know, how come, I remember when I put this out and requested people to speak, you know, some people said, I'm sorry, I'm not very comfortable because I haven't experienced racism. And I respected that, and I understand the pain that you have a lived experience is quite different from people who actually haven't had a lived experience. But I think when I read this very, very powerful statement which Chintan, who is the Race Discrimination Commissioner, which says, he says that racism only thrives when the community fails to say no, is very, very important. That, you know, it is very important to understand that the community is constantly at different waves in our history had different races experiencing abuse and discrimination, and this alarming trends that we get, these cycles that we continue to have. It is about us not having a community stand to say, no, this is not what we are going to accept. We can have a community stand when it comes to, you know, impact, when it is about impacting our health and well-being. Well, we're all agreeing on self-isolation and let's protect ourselves, let's look after each other. But why does this rule not apply when it comes to talking about race, racial abuse? Why can't the community come together for all of us to say no? So I'd like to bring in Madeline Johnson, our Gen Secretary of GSA, our General Secretary of GSA, to express her views. Welcome, Madeline.
Hi, Rachna, and thanks for having me. I'd like to speak to this issue a little bit from the perspective of GSA Council, but I do want to start by thanking everybody who's already spoken before me, in particular the international students on GSA Council who do such a fantastic job of advocating for international students, as well as providing leadership on how GSA can address these issues and educating others in what the issues are. I'd also like to thank Archit and his incredible work at UMSU International in addressing these issues. I want to start by saying that the racism that we've seen in the community lately as a result of coronavirus is sort of exacerbating racism that's always existed in our community in Australia. I found it really interesting to see that having spent in my undergrad, having studied Chinese and having spent time in China, and sort of hearing about the perspectives of what was going on in China from my Chinese friends, that the media dialogue we're seeing in Australia is so fundamentally shaped by a racist perspective on the issues that are occurring. And as a council at GSA, this is an issue that we have always stood against and will continue to stand against. Our policy platform clearly outlines that we stand against all forms of racism, and that international students in particular are a vital part of our community, our graduate student community, and that we will continue to support initiatives to address this. Our role in this conversation is to continue to promote these initiatives, to continue to uplift the voice of international students and support advocacy in addressing racism in the community. International students are a vital part of our graduate students and graduate student community, and we all benefit from having them in our community, which is why it's so terrible when we see issues like this occurring. Thank you.
Thank you, Madeline. And that's really good to bring up the GSA's council perspective, because I think as an organization, our aim and purpose is to ensure that the graduate community at the University of Melbourne experience inclusiveness, there is social connectedness, and a collaboration across the university in all aspects to ensure that we have harmony in our community. And the organization continues to advocate on strong objectives of representation and continue to advocate for strong policies that support the graduates in our community. We support and strive for academic excellence to ensure that students are supported to transition, to work from a graduate role. But I think the strongest focus has been on emotional health and well-being. And I think all our activities are about inclusiveness. It is about calling it out when it's not appropriate. So I think the message from us at GSA is we have no room for this kind of inappropriate behavior. We have no room, we have no space, we do not have time to tolerate racism in our community. And we will work very hard with all of you to stamp it out of our community. And yes, it continues to emerge, but we're not going to say and accept it as a part of our life. We've got to say no. So I'd like to invite Leah to say a few words. So welcome, Leah, on board.
Thanks, Rachna. Thanks for having me today. So having been an international student for the past 10 years here in Australia and previously in the UK, I've had my own run-ins with casual racism and comments, like hurtful comments to do with my race and prejudice from other students in my old university. But having been, since being at the University of Melbourne, I've been very privileged to be welcomed into a diverse and inclusive community. And as a film student at the VCA, we're constantly reminded of the value of multiculturalism and encouraged to uplift the voices of people from all races, nationalities, genders, and backgrounds. And I think now more than ever, in a time of social isolation and global crisis, it's important that we embrace these values and reflect on how we can come together as a society and as a university community to tackle what's ahead of us when we return to normality, as you say. It's important to have empathy and remember that in this period of uncertainty for all of us, like international students are facing additional struggles, being miles away from their families and having to navigate travel bans and visa issues on top of their education and everything that's going on. And it's also important to remember that racism doesn't only affect international students, but also Australian students from Chinese, Asian, or other culturally diverse backgrounds. And I think the main takeaway from this is that we should approach this as a way to think about how we all belong here equally, and we all have rights to be ourselves and to learn and thrive in this environment, and we should all support each other. And it's important to reach out to students, to international students, to people who are who might be facing these issues, because as Rachna and Emily pointed out, people don't always speak up, and people might be afraid to point out that they've been experiencing this. So please watch out for your friends and stay connected while we're staying at home, and look after each other's mental health. And I think if we work together, it's an issue that we can definitely address to make a more welcoming community for everyone, for all backgrounds. Thank you.
Thank you, Leah. That's such a beautiful message. Such a beautiful message. A message to actually to ask your community is, you know, often I believe when you experience hurt, it's so painful that even speaking about it is very hard, absolutely hard. And, you know, I've been here for many years in the country, and I remember being quite novel even to be looked at, because you would be the only person who looked very different. And I think sometimes even, you know, I think sometimes when you're hurt and when you're painful, you're angry and you take it out on someone by saying something very offensive, and you pick up vulnerability and say things that are very hurtful. And I think that pain is so deep that even to talk about it makes it very hard. But I think it's such a beautiful message that Leah said is, you know, we're all experiencing difficulty. We are all experiencing some kind of stress in our life, but taking it out on other people and hurting other people, and you know, passing inappropriate comments, commenting on people's race, asking people to go back to your country, and asking people, you know, making people feel uncomfortable is not going to reduce your stress, and well, you know, it's not going to make you feel better. And I think reaching out to appropriate services, seeking out to your friends and family and addressing those issues is important. And actually, one little message that I kind of carried is, when you're out and about, even when you're, you know, in this limited period, keep your eyes open to your surrounding. Please reach out to people who, when you see them being subjected to this kind of behavior, because it's alarming what we saw, just what happened to two of our international students, that there were people who were viewing it and watching it and were busy taking photographs and getting their phone out to take a clip of it. But actually helping those students there were very few who took the courage to do that. So stand up, say no to it. So it's really, really important. And before I call Vibol to say a few words, I read this beautiful article, which is there on the staff news, on the toxic spread of COVID-19 racism, a research done by Dr. Victor Sojo and Professor Hari Bapuchi on the University of Melbourne. And it's actually a research looking at how, when the world is grappling about COVID-19, you know, they acknowledge that racism and racist attacks on the rise, and they talk a little bit about the psychology behind it. Not that I'm saying it's acceptable, but, you know, the kind of behavior that everybody brings into this community, and a very strong message that, you know, racism is toxic, it's destructive, and it's not going to help us during a crisis. If you think by attacking people, you know, your pain is going to go away, it's not. And in the current pandemic, the world needs good science put into practice, sound and level-headed leadership, as well as kindness, solidarity, and the respect for all members of our community and those beyond our borders. So a plug into this article, The Toxic Spread of COVID-19 Racism. I mean, I thought it's so important to kind of read this pieces of research, because it tells you about the kind of behavior we're exhibiting in this difficult period of time, and trying to still understand that there is no place for it. So welcome, Vibol, on board, and it's wonderful to have you on board to read out your statement.
Hi, Rachna, and hey, everyone else. I just wanted to thank everyone for sharing their incredibly powerful and really, I mean, a lot of them are very sad, but it's incredibly powerful to use your voice and share that voice with your peers and your university. So I would just want to thank you all for that. I was extremely touched, and also echoed back to some of the experiences I've had growing up in Australia as well. But I don't want to talk about some painful experiences that I've had, but I want to talk about how I got through them and how you can, why racism feels really bad and really hurtful sometimes, because it happens in isolation. Because when it happens to us, it's super personal and it's super, or to groups of friends, it feels like it's just happening to you and no one else. So you feel already isolated and you feel, worthless and you have no value. And how I would say we can fix some of these stuff is that there are a lot of organizations that, a lot of local and community organizations that are set up to help fight racism, to help advocate for people of color and for multicultural communities. And for me, that was one of the strongest ways that I've managed to get through some of the hard stuff I've gone through and to meet more like-minded people that, all want to fight this terrible scourge of racism that we do have in our society. And especially for Leah, who I know is a creative, one of the best ways that we are combating racism is by having more diverse representation of people within our media and as well within our own friendship circles. It's a lot harder to fear someone's race. I mean, it's a lot easier to fear someone's race and their ethnicity if we don't know them, if we don't know who they are, if we don't know what they're about, and if we don't know, what their motives are. A way we can combat that, of course, and, bridge that gap and bridge and heal each other as well as a society is that we have to come together and take collective action so that we can, the way that we're doing right now, showing the university community that, and GSA as well, that there is no room for racism within our community. And I just wanted to leave you guys on that, that, we do have power ourselves to fight back, and we're fighting back right now by having this amazing panel that we're doing. And that this is one of the numerous ways that advocacy happens within this space, as well as the numerous other ways that fighting racism happens. Yeah, so thank you for everyone for sharing their stories.
Thank you so much, Vibol. It's, I think what I hear from you is sometimes these reflections about what we go through is pretty painful. Actually, words can't express how those are painful. And I remember as a very young person taking up a job and, you're excited to be in this first job of yours, feeling super excited. I'm going to be this, person who is going to change the world. I'll be working with other young homeless people and trying to make this world a better place. And when you're very young and suddenly, you go all out of your way to do your job very well. And if the person whom you're working with is not happy with your outcome, the first thing they pick up is your vulnerability and say, I don't even know why you're here. You should be going back to your country. And I think at the time that I was growing up, I just did not know how to deal with it. It was so hurtful. Every time I walked around, I would think, is this really where I want to be? I really feel so hurt and so painful. But I think something in me and the support that you have from your friends and family, it actually made it my cause. It kind of made it my cause of existence, that I am not going to just leave and run away. It's easier for me to run away. I just want to fight it. But can I say to you, as Vibol said, it's not easy. You've got to actually start believing and hoping, and the campaign has to continue. It's easy to be the same, and it's difficult to be different. And I think it's important to understand that we as a community have to promote and support difference and accept that. So I'd like to invite Sash Sacheta, our council member, to say a few words.
Yeah, thank you, Rachna, and thank you for having me on this panel. It's been really incredible to hear from the previous speakers today, and I'm really thank you all for being here today. And I think this is a really great opportunity to talk about an issue where perhaps a lot of students and even staff members are feeling that they need to listen to or to consolidate with others. So I really appreciate this opportunity. Today I'll be speaking more from both my personal experiences and who I've chatted to, but also as a GSA council member. I, along with the GSA, condone any form of discrimination that students and staff experience either on or off campus. No one should experience discrimination, whether it be in their workplace, on public transport, on university grounds, or simply anywhere to be fact. As a woman of colour, it's been unfortunate that well before COVID-19, I, along with my peers of culturally diverse backgrounds, have experienced or witnessed racism in Australia. Racism has definitely been a long-term issue that this country faces, and I think has been exacerbated even more recently. It is particularly upsetting, however, to hear COVID-19 induced racism where students, staff and peers, particularly of Southeast Asian background, have been experiencing this. And the other day I was just chatting with a friend who was a university student, and she's of Chinese background. And she was telling me how she was actually too scared to leave her home because of racism and scared about walking on the street and what people would think of her. This was quite confronting for me to hear. At GSA, we support students of all backgrounds and embrace multiculturalism at university. It is what makes our students' experience more valuable by learning and listening to students of different values and opinions. GSA will always hear the input of international students, and we will continue to advocate for policies that support these communities. This includes respect and creating safe spaces, but also improving mental health and wellbeing initiatives that are available at university. So I do stand in solidarity with our diverse student community and support any measures the university, government and community take to prevent and call out such actions. I encourage my peers to also do the same, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today. Thanks, Rachna.
Thank you very much, Sash. I think it's important as we are, as we're talking today, to let the student members know that, please feel comfortable to access legal services like UMSU Legal on our campus. There's the Victorian Equal Opportunity Commission that you can ring to get information about issues that impact you and how racism can be dealt with. There's the Human Rights Law Center. So Victoria Legal Aid has a phone service that you can, and these resources and numbers will be put on the resource section of the GSA website. So sometimes it's extremely challenging for us, and we may feel that we may be quite afraid to kind of seek legal help, but I think there are very supportive organizations that can support you in either taking action against an individual, an organization, or an institution if you are being subjected to racism or discrimination. So that's very, very important. And I have a couple of attendees today, and if any one of you wanted to read or wanted to speak or provide a message, please just let me know through your the chat program or a Q&A. But I'd like to invite Tavita Lasuma, our General Manager, to talk a little bit about, what are some of the student engagement activities for our graduates to feel engaged and socially connected that, allows the camaraderie within our cohort to allow us to feel supported. Tavita, over to you.
Right, thanks, Rachna. I'd like to thank everyone that was who's taken the time and courage and determination to speak up on this topic. For me myself, being from a multicultural background, it really hits home about all your stories, and so I thank you. So GSA obviously is quite strong about not accepting this type of behaviour in the community, and that rings through to all our activities and events and our engagements that we do with all of our students and the rest of our student community. I mean, we try and create a safe space for anybody to get involved and to make sure that there is that safe space. So every Monday to Thursday at 10 a.m. we run GradChats. Similar to this situation, we have students and partners on a webinar. We talk about the services and support mechanisms that are available for postgraduate students, be that for mental health or transition to work or creating healthier communities within their own groups of friends or cohort. And so that's our schedule is Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. And you can get on our channels through Facebook and our website to see that. We also have started up a closed group on Facebook called Connection in Isolation at GSA. It's slowly building up numbers. So we have almost 300 students that have linked into that group who are just sharing stories and different ways that they're coping under the COVID-19, but also just in general from being isolated and away from potentially loved ones who are overseas. So it's a great way to stay connected, talk to us at GSA. We have a 1-800 number, so 1-800-GSA-HELP will get you through to us, 9 till 5, and we'll look to extend that timing to provide better access to students after hours. So please contact us, and we can direct you towards the right department or area to support you. Another one of our great support mechanisms at GSA are graduate groups. So we have over almost 150 graduate groups at the moment, and these are like common societies, but are built to support and engage with postgraduate students at the University of Melbourne. And that's another way that we can sort of tap into your own community. And we're talking about over 20,000 members in total from the 150 or so grad groups that can be acting as a group that you can reach out to or talk to, especially on situations like we're discussing now. So we're also doing some social connectedness activities. So we're doing some dance and music every Friday at 3 o'clock. We'll be running Feel Good Fridays. We'll have some live music streamed through our Facebook page to allow a nice entry into the weekend and hopefully finish your week off on a high note. So I just want to say, on behalf of GSA, we are here. We're not physically in the building or on campus, but we're still here fighting strong for you guys to support you, especially in this time of need.
Thank you so much, Tavita. I'm sorry for the listeners who found it a bit hard. I think we will, when we do the recording, we'll ensure that it's much more clearer for you to all hear. But I think just to repeat what Tavita was saying is that there is a whole lot of activities that we are hosting virtually. There are some financial support that we are offering to some of our students. But I think the graduate representatives, our grad groups, and our graduate council members are wonderful people. You should just be able to pick up the phone and talk about their issue. The contact details are on our website. And I think no issue is big or small. So please feel free to contact us so that we can continue to lobby for you and advocate for you. So I may just ask if there is any final comment anybody in the panel would like to say. If you just let me know, then I can actually allow you to say anything if you'd like to say something. If you please let me know. But I think it has been such a powerful session and a wonderful session. And I guess as some of you know, that I'm very fond of poetry. And the poem that actually struck me the most when I was coming to this session was written by Indian poet Rabindranath Tagore. And it's very meaningful now. It says, where the mind is without fear and the head is held high, where knowledge is free and the world has not been broken up into fragments by narrow domestic walls, where words come out from the depth of truth and where tireless striving stretches its arms towards perfection, where the clear stream of reason has not lost its way into the dreary desert sand of dead habits, where the mind is led forward by thee into a ever-widening thought and action, into that heaven of freedom, and let my country awake. And it was written at a time, I think, when India was going through an issue of independence. But I was just thinking, after so many years, and when I look at a situation here, I always think about there are a sense of that poetry which still holds quite close to my heart, where we have to be not fearful for others. We should be looking at the knowledge that we derive through our degrees and our positions. We're not looking at each other through our differences. We're actually being courageous to accept other people's views, and we are actually living in the true sense of freedom and the freedom of feeling equal. So thank you so much for everyone who's joined today. It's been just my honor and privilege to host this program. So thank you to GSA staff, council members, and all the participants, and particularly to UMSU International, CAPA, and the other guest speakers who've provided the statements for today. Thank you so much.